dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our world for hundreds of U.S. military.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You calm down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series. And welcome on this beautiful blue planet tonight, wherever you are, watching the sunset out next to a beautiful lake, hiking in a forest, endless desert dunes in 360 degrees, wherever your mind is taking you tonight. I could call this perhaps the show. It's real. It's gotten real. Europe's real. China's real. And everything Ransom and I've been talking about for years is now at the cusp. Let's talk about tonight. I wanted to go down a different rabbit hole along with world events here, but I've had a couple really interesting conversations through the week. And as we go through tonight's show, instead of thinking about financial collapse, why don't we think about a financial freeze? That way everybody's assets will be locked into these incredibly hyperinflated, incredible high prices. So when it comes to the reset on a basket of currencies, including gold, the markets will just be frozen completely. Everything will be frozen for a month, maybe two. Forget the collapse. It's going to be a freeze, and then it'll be a reset, and then there'll be an instant restart to the markets, and they will function completely without having the tumultuous breaking down and rebuilding process. We'll get that freeze. And this is what I wanted to talk about. How many ways have you protected yourself? Because if we are going to go into some sort of financial freeze and then a reset, which I've been told that it's planned, then what kind of assets would you hold that regardless if financial markets were frozen, you'd still have access to those? We're talking cryptocurrency, gold, silver. Okay, those are the low-hanging fruit. But what about a storehouse full of grain, fuel, generators, food, these kind of things that regardless of how much freezing takes place in the financial markets, you still have something that holds value as an asset class. Vehicles, not really sure. There's probably a very lengthy list, but I've, just trying to work my mind through it. So whatever the Fed and the full money system cannot freeze is exactly the thing you're going to want to purchase as an asset class to hold to get you through this, because after the reset, it's going to be repegged back to a different value. So if you have a warehouse full of grain and they reset the value, when it comes back to it, you still have that same asset that wasn't frozen, and you could trade it well outside the boundaries of new valuation. So moving through tonight, I really had a couple epiphanies over today and yesterday. Is this whole Adapt 2030 channel, and Ransom joining me for the last year to be such a kind host with me here to try to dissect all this information around the planet, what's happening, and these geopolitical events and whatnot. From the beginning of my Adapt 2030 channel, after I talked to John Casey and throwing some information around with him, and then Robert Felix brought me in the loop, and then Ben at Suspicious Observers and their whole crew over there, I got this idea at the point 1 year out there would be a complete lockdown of the planet, because the amount of food crop losses that people would start rioting on the streets, and governments would be in peril of losing their shall we say, positions of power and literally being overthrown. 1 year before the full food losses start, to the point where it's going to be people in Western nations starving to death on the streets. That 1 year period before that starts to happen, they're going to lock it down. So here we are. It's real, it's happening, and this is the beginning of it. This is the beginning of the 1 year lockdown. By the end of October and on November, you're going to see what I mean. It's going to be hard, pipe-hitting lockdown. They're not going to let people go to the streets and overthrow governments because you're starving to death. It won't happen. They're going to lock you down, let you starve in your house, and have teams come by and clean your body out later. This is what they're going to do versus getting overthrown. And this is where we're heading. The crop losses are so significant this year. The yields coming in from 0 to 0. Yields coming in from American wheat is from the 1960s. Losses across Central and South America, gargantuan. Uncountable. Not even there. They lost their entire second corn crop. Australia's not coming back. Record cold coming in. New Zealand's not growing anything. Record cold coming in. South Africa completely lost everything this year. The whole state of what's going on politically. But then they're record cold across all the way to Zimbabwe and further up in areas that would grow crops. And as we look, there's not enough gas anywhere. Now it's the whole thing. They're pulling the rug on the coals. You can see it's a full planned collapse. It's a calculated planned collapse. So hopefully you can get ready for it. And this is kind of where I want to go tonight. And Ransom, I appreciate you joining me, because I know you have so deep thoughts, man, super deep thoughts on everything happening here. So let's throw this show. It's real, it's here, and it's time for everybody to put their plan B, C, D, E, and F into action right now.
It's definitely time to get your big boots on right now. Big, tall rubber boots, waist-high waders, because it's getting there. I was just looking at, the constant supply of articles telling us that there are no supplies. The last one I looked at today that I was kind of tripping out, that gives you a indicator of where we're at, as the proverbial, SH hits the fan. Here's an article from Fox 5 out of New York about the diaper shortage. Now it's going to start really getting to where people start noticing things are missing. So diaper shortage hits U.S. amid COVID pandemic, they say. Supply chain issues. And if you think about what diapers are made out of, that's what fills all the land, the landfills everywhere. But the main thing I'm seeing right now is that you won't have to worry about all these other problems because they are going to force a war on China. I'm pretty sure that that's exactly where we're going. Now you're starting to see the heads of both political parties in the United States saying language like they want to have a conflict. And, I kind of knew this was coming. I mean, everybody did. But when Obama pulled out the 7th Fleet out of the Strait of Taiwan when he was in office, I knew there was a major change happening. And it looks like we're there. So I think the first indicator that everything is going to collapse will be some kind of conflict right off of the coast of Taiwan.
Well, China's already shut down their manufacturing completely and almost wholly. I used to work and live in China, so I have a few contacts still working in Hong Kong, and some persons who have financial ties into Shanghai and still communicate with the offices there. So I was reaching out for a couple personal favors, just like recontacting, how's it going, because they're interested in my, the reason we ever even began talking was this whole solar grand minimum, which they thought I was a lunatic in the beginning talking about, but now they say, wait, these things have actually panned out. So, it's easy to make conversation again and reach back out. China has in earnest pretty much shut down complete manufacturing there. And the scariest thing was, and here's to put it in perspective. China has shut down the soybean crush industry. Now, what that means in English, soybean crush is where they bring the soybeans in and then they crush them for soybean oil. That's cooking oil for the populace. China has made the conscious decision to stop the crushing of soybeans to produce oil because they don't have enough electricity. So where they're at publicly telling you, okay, yeah, we shut off a bunch of Apple production, we shut down a bunch of, swipe screen glass producers and fabricators and XYZ, whatever, for the Apple iPhones and iPads. It's so far above that, it's probably 50x worse than you are getting from Chinese media. Because when somebody tells me that they are stopping the soybean crush and they're limiting the amount of oil coming into the country for cooking, which is a mainstay, soybean oil for cooking, there's something drastically wrong when you're stopping the food production because you don't have enough electricity. Shutting down a factory, that's one thing. But shutting down the mechanisms to deliver something to cook food to the populace, that is a hugely different level of something terribly wrong that's not being shared with the public.
Like a 10-year worldwide price peak of food. That's a pretty good indicator. No, the reason I kind of keep harping on China, and it kind of makes me feel like we're in the last days of Germany or the last days of Iraq, when they were telling the people they were winning. Every one of these mainstream media outlets are still portraying China as more of a superpower than us, actually. Here's a article from MSN that's mirroring the Washington Post saying that Americans are sensing China's eclipsing the U.S. economically and protecting our jobs is what we should be paying attention to. But as well as I do, jobs are being used as a weapon right now. I sent you that graph earlier, and we've talked about this ad nauseum about how half of the workforce is being mandated out of a job. They either have to sell out their principles, literally their body, to stay in any of these organizations, from government down to the 100-person employer, right? So they're quitting en masse. And then we're talking about, we need to save American jobs from the Chinese. And you're talking about also them shutting down manufacturing. Now, I know China is pretty good at the art of, illusion, kind of. So I do agree they would probably be pinching all kinds of stuff right now. But what are they really manufacturing in the background? Because from my perspective, they've been building a major manufacturing complex. It seems like it's probably the biggest in the world at this point, especially with America shutting down our manufacturing. So how long would it take a nation to change over to a world war? And the only thing I have for reference is how fast the German army came about. But not only that, how fast Americans turned over our manufacturing center to the war machine. Now, we don't have that now. So, we do have surplus and weapons of old stuff, but that these kind of people are really thinking about the bottom line as far as their ability to control money and control power. So I'm thinking the military industrial complex for years has been planning on a major war with someone. I don't think it'll actually go, worldwide doomsday thermonuclear. I do think that they may do a couple of exchanges like we talked about last time. But even better would be to just give the world a giant kinetic manpower war, which and I know China has a lot of disposable resources when it comes to a kinetic war, and that i.e. people. They have plenty of people to get rid of, and I'm wondering if our own Democrat Party that's in control right now wouldn't just give Taiwan up and then allow the Japanese, so to speak, to deal with it, because we pulled out our fleet. In the last couple of days, we've had reports of nuclear subs of ours there. There's commandos on the ground, according to some news outlets. Let's see here. U.S. News right here says China fires back at reports of U.S. commandos in Taiwan. And if you remember, we were supposed to give them a massive arms deal during Obama, and he decided not to. We were going to give them a bunch of F-16s and some F-35 fighters. So it's like Pearl Harbor, so to speak, and the fact that there's a major conflict building up, but it seems like one side of the conflict is actually destructing their war machine in that area. So have we given up the South China Sea? And are we at the point finally when the two major powers of the world are going to fight for control of the entire world and put us into finally a one world system?
Depends. If that was the plan all along. So going back into the 1990s, you now look back in history and understand that the consolidation of all manufacturing was meant to go to a single hub across the planet to weaken every single country which was independent. So strip all the manufacturing out, bring it to a region that is a single point source for everything, reduce the cost, make it appear as if this just-in-time delivery globalism system, everything made in a single place, not in my backyard, put all the pollution over there. Awesome, everybody win, 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 win across the way. And it looks like a great thing for 20 years. But then we start to see, was this all a ploy to get all the manufacturing into a single zone that only one area of the planet can control what we are going to receive as goods? Looking at it from that standpoint, how quickly could you retool a factory or a fleet of factories for a new mission? Perhaps that is the disguise is, oh, everything's closed down. But how much satellite photography is coming from there to see what types of trucks are entering these factories? And would they retool their entire factory fleet, if you will, for a better term, for war machinery? I mean, today's wars are high tech. And, just a simple basis here. Even the best tanks in the 1950s fought in the Korean War. Our tanks today, in what you consider an old, outdated model, could be running at 50 miles per hour and hit something 10 times more accurately than a tank in the 1950s. And these are the ones that are considered outdated today, which would have been the ones from the 1990s. So when we're moving over and you're talking about the need to depopulate China, the number, okay, so culturally, and I'm going to step back here a second and try to explain it in a fuller detail. Culturally, China always had favored boys being born because of the one-child policy. So if you had a chance as a female, even if you had twins and you were having twins, you had to remove one of the babies through forced abortion. So most times they would choose to keep the boy because the man stays in the house, retains a family name, earns the income, and if the man gets married, brings the wife to the house, which is another asset into the house. By having a daughter, you're basically raising something for free that will be sent off to another family as a worker, and you get nothing in return except a few $1,000s as a dowry on the backside. Now, in the older days, this is crazy. Even going back into the early 1900s, once the woman had said goodbye at the marriage ceremony held in the hometown of the family, so the parents could see her for the very last time she would ever be seen. Once she got married and the vows were done and they had that big party for the night, the very next day when she went off to the next village, she never came back, ever. Even for holidays and things, it was like, you're part of that family now. It's like literally that person was sold off as a farm animal and sent over to the next. And I hate to put it in that rude, kind of crude, rudimentary form, but that's the way in today's vision you would look at it. Like the woman was sold as livestock and sent off and never seen again to another family or another portion of the, mountain range or whatever it would be. Now, the problem with this one-child policy that had reigned superior for so long is that there were so many men born at this time in the last, 40 years that there weren't enough women to marry Chinese to Chinese in the society. So men were now forced to go to other countries to look for brides to come back. That's one small thing. But at the same time, the whole narrative in Chinese culture was the more education you get, the better job you get. The more money you make. Fine. But when you sit there with 6 million PhDs out of work, working at McDonald's because they can't find jobs because the job market was saturated with PhDs, and that was, the younger generation really understand the narrative that they got sold a bill of goods. I got a PhD, I can't find a job, and I'm working at a fast food restaurant. Yeah. So that was just like 6 million PhDs that couldn't find work. But then you come down into the master's degree crowd, and then those who are trying to work their way up and find any kind of jobs whatsoever at all, then having to learn all these foreign languages, and the animosity of foreigners coming in there. They're making 5 times what the locals were making just by dropping in because they speak a different language. And then you got the whole 35 or 40 million more men than women during this marriage age, certain demographics there. And it was a conundrum anyway, and it's destabilizing the society. There's too much workforce. Demographics are messed up. And there was social chaos happening already because of this anyway. This is years ago. They were already saying this got to be 6 years ago, something. The numbers are really difficult to find now, but you could find the numbers of protests. And this was like 2015 or so. There were 70,000 street protests where the military needed to be brought in. And that was like years ago. The thing about 70,000 where they had to send the army in. 70,000 instances of street protests in China. And not to mention the factory workers that don't get paid, which set a whole another gamut of, instability in the society where, this economic implosion, factory workers aren't paying the employees are blocking the gate because legally, this is the whole thing too, legally, if the employees block the gates and can lock in the assets in the factory, they're going to have to be sold in a bankruptcy court, and any money out of the machinery, the trucks, the goods, whatever was in the warehouse, the stock, all needs to be shared amongst the employees. So now you have 2 different factions fighting. Bosses want those assets out of there. They want their machinery out of there. They want their, base stock out of there. They want the goods out. They want the vehicles out of there, because if the employees can hold it in there until somebody comes to get the dispute resolved, they get part of that money divided by all of them. So now you got a boss who says, I'm not going to pay you. I can't afford anything. I'm going out of business. And factory workers are like, cool, we're going to sell everything in the factory. We'll take it that way. So the bosses are hiring private armies, or they're really in with the local government. So they get the government to declare a state of emergency, and they use the police there to come and then beat up and arrest all of the, legitimate workers who just want to get paid. But it's such a backhanded country like this, such, Guanxi to solve problems like this. So then, then it gets real pipe hitting over there, because they understand now what's about to happen when the factories go out of business and they're going to bring in the army. So these people have nothing left to lose. There's nothing left to lose now for anybody, anywhere. Talking about at the low levels, factory workers not getting paid, and they would battle it out with the army and police. These guys got guns going against them. They got pitchforks, and they're still willing to go on the line to try to get paid because they realize they got nothing. And how many times have people been just shot and just dragged away? No, nothing to see here. You can't report on it. So many thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times. So these people just trying to get their money, working, that have been screwed out of their money by these bosses who own these mafia people who are in collusion with the government and the local police forces to come around. That's just one subset of a subset of a subset. So when we're looking inside China's problems, far greater than them not being able to crush soybean and provide food for the citizens. Oh my gosh. I mean, what's going on there already is just so far off the hook of trying to keep the place together. But now we're going to add in food shortages and incredible rising inflation. Their only other option is war. That's it. So I could see, Ransom, like you said, retooling the factories in a fast manner to get them over to something that we're not aware of. Oh, yeah, if all the factories are closed, yeah. But they got underground tunnels or whatever, bringing in all the stuff to retool to like do, howitzer barrels or something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just sent you this article right now. Now, it doesn't really say what it was, but it says that an attack, this is the headline out of USNI News. It says attack, submarine USS Connecticut suffers underwater collision in the South China Sea. And that pretty much shows that we're doing all kinds of operations over there. But I also sent you this other link here. How well can AI pick targets from satellite photos? And the Army aims to find out. So when you read that article, it talks about how F-35s and other things are already, in the, how did they put it? The Scarlet Dragon exercise. And if you think about that in biblical terms, how creepy that sounds. I also wanted to ask you, what do you think about all of these? Some of them are repeats, but some of them are new. Recently, we've heard of all these biblical places being found again, also at the same time in the backdrop of World War III or IV, whatever you want to call it. You got Sodom and Gomorrah supposedly found.
I know, that's crazy.
Right, and then they're rehashing the Noah's Ark find and saying, no, there's more legitimate geology that they just kind of, shoveled off and said it was just rocks. But then on top of that, you also got university in Israel claiming that they found literally where Moses talked to God on Mount Sinai, like where the burning bush was, etc.
Yeah, Mount Sinai. Yeah. That's in Egypt, though.
Yeah, but they're saying that they found all of these biblical places, kind of bring it to the forefront of your mind, and it's just like all over the internet. And then at the same time, right next to it, you'll see these articles about China and Iran having a super big drone program. Let's see here. What was the name of that article? Wake up to a world where, Iran's drone threat from the Jerusalem Post. So they're really pumping up this idea of a actual kinetic war. And I bet you money that there will be some kind of conflict on Golgotha Hill right there in Jerusalem, right? Just like it's supposed to be, so that we can have the place for Armageddon. And I've been thinking that this is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy for some time, because I know the elites love occult stuff, but even more than that, they love to keep things occulted away from the commoners. They hide symbols, they hide, all of those massive amounts of books and knowledge that are hidden away in the Vatican that they don't want to share to the world. If they were really, benevolent in nature, once we moved into the modern era, they would have shared all of those historical documents, books, etc. But they don't. because they don't want to share that with the commoners. And at the same time, they know the commoners believe the lowest level interpretations of the religions, which includes prophecy, which is, that somebody's going to eat a ham sandwich on Solomon's temple and then the whole thing's going to go off. But really, if you think about that happening, knowing that China and the UN and the United States are all weaseling for power with all of these African and Middle Eastern nations having these nonstop proxy wars, you can kind of see where they could use self-fulfilling prophecy to really get people hyped up around the world. And then in the backdrop, we have pandemic and war and famine. And all of this is just ready to make sure that the massive amounts of the population aren't, canning food, growing food, learning how to make their own clothing, and, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody's on nerve with this apocalypse. It's like a want, almost like a sickness. The population is really wanting this, and the elite want it too. And for some reason, I talk about this over and over again, how the elite would gain control. And everybody thinks of these really severe apocalyptic things. That doesn't benefit the elite. There's only one part of the puzzle that they want to remove from the earth, and it's not the earth. So they're not going to destroy the earth. But what they will do is get rid of what they consider the scum on the earth, or the undesirables, which are the massive amounts of people that they consider low or less than them.
Yeah, and when he said, they'll be battling on the mound, it wouldn't surprise me if magically angels descended and stopped the aggression, and suddenly they had to bestow our allegiance to some new type of leader on the planet or something, because they stopped the aggression. Because you can imagine, and we've heard so many of these, holographic type of technologies that exist. So imagine if there were a full-on scale, that side of the mound, they're shooting into this side, things are exploding all over the place, and you're seeing a full-on battle go on. And then in between that, angels descend down in there, and it doesn't matter, the bullets are ricocheting through them, because it's a hologram. And these angels appear out of nowhere and stop your fighting, you shall cease. And people go to their knees and, in such the religious place between two major religions, Christianity and Muslim as well. Can you imagine that were to happen? How, everybody would drop their swords, because in this prophecy of the last days, they reach their eyes to the heaven and they drop their weapons, go home to their families. Is something just like this. And imagine if it all occurred, on national-wide television and worldwide television, the angels are sent out of there, and then suddenly, like 15 minutes later, you get hundreds, millions of angels coming through the atmosphere that you can consider above your head. You can't touch them. They'd be in the cloud layers. They would take physical form in the cloud layers. Could be whatever tech that exists to bend clouds, take clouds, and appear as those shapes are coming. So everybody would see it above their heads across the entire planet, depending on how many satellites were above us. Oh, gee, did Starlink just launch? Yeah. So inner Earth orbit, lower orbit, middle orbit, and how many satellites have positioned and been stationed above our heads, and how advanced is this tech? Because I'm going to keep coming back to it. Everything we're seeing, even that robot from Boston Dynamics that did the backflips in the parkour course, is 50 years behind what's really out there. So when you talk about these sci-fi movies of these robots running around with superhuman strength, absurd things that are just so precise on everything and never stop, they already exist. So why would it not exist some hyper, beyond imagination, 3D graphic, 4D graphic, holographic, that would blow Hollywood studios out of the water, that's 50 years ahead of a Hollywood studio CGI setup that could be deployed through the skies globally, and have that as the nest point there, the hill you're talking about. I mean, if you're talking prophecy and two different major religions, and seeing angels descend and stop this, and then angels descending out of the heavens across the entire planet, I mean, that would be an interesting day, kick back with a couple martinis, put out the lawn chairs, and see what's going to happen through the night. It's going to be an interesting one. But everywhere we look, it's not really, they talk about privacy, like signs in the skies, okay. But how much of it's real and how much of it concocted to give you the illusion that that's happening? See, nothing that you can see right now is happening organically. Everything seems to have a ploy behind it to push the human emotion for the effect to get the cause, or the cause and the effect, whatever way you want to look at it. So descent. And, one thing here, you sent me that link about the collision. Those are underwater drones. So think about that. There's sort of an underwater kamikaze. Nothing exploded. There was no concussion. There was no explosion, anything. They just ran an underwater drone at high speed into the hull of that thing. Oh, my bad. No harm, no foul. Nothing. Hey, it was just you hit something underwater. So how many times can you bash these things before? Look at that. They already have to make dry dock because of one collision. So imagine if there's fleets of thousands of these underwater drones all over the place. I mean, how long before a submarine fleet's completely inoperable? After a couple bangs here, a shock there, a boom there, Oh, my bad. You hit an underwater reef. Oh, yeah, that was it. It was an underwater volcanic cone. My bad. How long can this go on?
Well, I don't know about that, but I got a couple points on some stuff you said. For one, China does have thousands of drones underwater. They've been bragging about it for years. Matter of fact, they have an entire underwater AI city there, complete with giant fish and all kinds of stuff. It's crazy. But on another note, you know how you were talking about these possible drones that would be putting out, like illusions or holograms or whatever. What is really funny about that is the fact that that article I just sent you about the Scarlet Dragon exercise in the U.S. military, drone. Well, it's not a drone. It's AI deciding the targets. And they were saying they're already using F-35. And if you've read the Project for a New American Century, in there, it talks about how they wanted to change the United States Air Force to a completely AI Air Force by 2025. Now, we're rapidly approaching that, and they do. And if you've seen that last week, that Skunk Works Lockheed Martin thing that got caught on camera, that's obviously a drone. And, that's probably what a lot of people have been seeing. And like you said, it's like 50 years old. But imagine this satellite weapon system deciding targets from space. And what you have, if you were on the ground and some stuff just came out of the sky and blew up half your city, you wouldn't know what it was. So whatever propaganda the authorities gave you, you would believe it, whether or not it was aliens or terrorists or, you could say they were angels or aliens with the holographic stuff while things are blowing up and being destroyed with no vessels that you could see, just happening from space. And this is all technology we already have. So it's not even that far-fetched that you could combine a psychological warfare campaign with actual tech that they're using right now and convince the world anything. I mean, there's been a lot of convincing lately about things going on in the world, as you know, and most of the world believed it. In fact, they all went in unison, enemy, foe, whatever it is, and you got to see the hidden hand of world government. And, I keep bringing this up, but it still leaves me full of awe. The fact that it's the first time that I've ever heard about, seen in my lifetime, all of the countries in the world, every single one of them, enemy or not, from each other, in unison, do the same things to their populace. So this tells me that the level of control from the very top has reached down and given, instructions to the lower level governments that we think of as world leaders, like presidents and other things like that. I also saw this article right here, and we've talked about this many times, about human-animal chimeras. This is one that
I saw that video. It was very disturbing. Actually, I looked at that and I felt so sorry for that creature. I was looking at, oh my gosh, I really felt sorry for. I had such deep empathy for that creature that was between two species, forced to take the physical body.
Well, I'm not sure if it's a real thing, because pigs actually often have this look from birth defects, and they've been on the internet for years. But this one actually is linking to an article that's claiming that they did indeed do that, and it's factual. It's not hard to look up on Google that there are hundreds of genetic companies doing these things right now. So just think about some black ops, off the book stuff. You could mix amphibious, reptilian, all you wanted. You could get anything that you wanted, like a gray looking creature, but also you can have explosions, you can have stuff in the sky. It's not even out of the realm of basic technology that we use today. And when you combine that with how silly the populace seems to be about things, and how easily and gullible, naive that they act, you can see that it's very easy. And in fact, when you read these people's papers, these elites, the lower level ones like the presidents, you read that Project for a New American Century, it goes over several things that happened. So if some of the things have happened, probably the rest of them will too. So the first in there is that they said they needed a new Pearl Harbor that killed at least 3,000 Americans. Check that off the list. That happened on 9/11, as we all know. So we got a super surveillance state. We got special powers given to the government and a super police state set up, and everybody kind of went with that and forgot about that. But the next thing in there was that we were going to invade 7 countries and collapse them. We pretty much did that, as you saw in the Arab Spring and all of that whole era through the Obama administration. And then after that, it says that the United States and their allies would control low Earth orbit and convert our Air Force to a completely AI system. So, and like you were saying, these drones at the bottom of the ocean, there's drone tanks. I've showed them on my channel, really high-tech stuff that they're starting to let out, including fusion and the idea of fusion. But when you get into all this stuff, you realize that they are completely in control of the perception. And I'm going to quote Dick Cheney as he said, "We will tell you what reality is." Dick Cheney said that in a live interview back in the day. And he was straight up saying that they are the designers of your reality and that they will decide for you what that reality is. And I believe that they are finally pulling the plug on their plan. And so people need to get into some of these books that these eugenicists and elites have written about. And matter of fact, they still brag about it in propaganda and predictive programming. If you've watched the Spider-Man movie that had the I forgot what his name is, the optical illusion guy, in that movie, a satellite system sent out a bunch of drones that gave this guy powers to make fake scenes and monsters and spaceships and whatever he wanted. And they were, just like you said, they were little drones putting out projections. So that's been shown right in your face, the idea of it, in a major blockbuster Marvel production.
Yeah, controlling the skies as well. We all read those documents, and they take you they take you in 16 different directions. But what's interesting is it all comes back into one single dot today. Because controlling the skies, when you look at it, they were talking about geoengineering and using different types of atmospheric heaters from HAARP, etc., to bend the ionosphere to create different atmospheric flow patterns to either flood an enemy, dry them out, cause massive food crop losses and famines in countries. Okay, that's one aspect of controlling the skies. But again, a whole drone fleet of automation, because everybody who is a pilot that has taken the experimental gene therapy injected into their bodies, they're not going to be around long. So all these incredible trained pilots that took $25 million to train to get them to fight the jets that we have currently, you're going to have to transition to an AI fleet anyway, because the human input into that's going to be gone shortly if they were injected. Then you come back into this whole police state you referenced. Yeah, you're coming into massive global food shortages where people in Western countries, now mark my words, and this is a projection and prediction that you may or may not want to hear, by the end of 2022, and I will say by, give it a December 31st, 2022, just at the end of next year, you will see Western nation individuals starving to death on the streets in our countries. And that would go from Australia to New Zealand to America to Canada to England and everywhere in the EU and all this. By the end of next year, you are going to see people starving to death on our streets. And you know, hungry people have caused revolution through history. So if we're going to go that route, 9/11 set up that super police state to prevent this. And now COVID comes in and adds a whole nother level of lockdown on top of what the police couldn't do because the police can only respond. Fire trucks aren't in the state. Fire trucks are in the station. Think of that as a police. They can only come out when they're responding to a fire. So yeah, there's a street protest and, you know, they're attacking this building over here and they can only respond after that happens. But think about starving people. They have nothing to lose, nothing. So when they come out in the millions, hundreds of millions, and be like, hey, you know, we need food. You don't give us food, your government does stay in power. They're not even giving you the chance to come on the streets now with this lockdown with the COVID. It was so ingeniously planned. Whoever did this, you know, I'm not a fan of nefarious actions, but I do give them props for being some brilliant planners on this. Because the different levels interwoven to stop any type of community organization, to stop any type of street protest, large or small, and then to implement a police state to respond to that, but also be able to arrest them just even for being outside before they can even organize into a protest. And then knowing that all these crop losses are coming and trying to mask it, and push people in, it's a brilliant plan. They reset the economy through a freeze, so none of the upper echelon of elitists lose any money. Everybody at the bottom will take the hit. You're going to be reset 10-1 or 100-1 after the new basket plus gold currency, new whatever it is form it takes to replace the dollar. Comes in, places a stable reserve currency for the planet. Whoever is doing this, I don't know how many centuries it's taken them or if it's an AI program in conjunction with, but everything is moving to AI. So, you know, what if this AI goes run away as well? You know, can they pick the targets? Of course they could, based on what we know today. But what if that thing starts to think like itself? And how many real world instances have we seen versus what we've seen through Hollywood where things go run amok when it's AI and then they start targeting the people? Like you said, the elite of the planet find us as the virus. They want to remove the human populace off the planet, not the planet itself. So, you know, we get into a whole bunch of conundrums here, but everything was based on 9/11 happening. If 9/11 didn't happen, none of this would be in front of you right now. The only reason it can be is because the police state was set up as such a thing after 9/11, period.
I agree. That was the focal point. You know, I've thought a lot about that over the years, what that meant. And I was doing a little bit of studying into the reoccurrence and renaming of the female goddess over time. And as you know, like back in the day, they had different people that would run different parts of the zodiac, and you have different signs and different gods were associated to running things. But it was pretty obvious to me, looking at the occult nature of 9/11 and what they built afterwards, that the entire thing was a giant blood sacrifice that they forced the entire world to participate in. And it wasn't done completely with the 3,000 people or so that died in New York, but they spread this killing, and it's been ongoing till now. It's just a new version of it that they're trying now. But think about the 2 million civilians that died when we invaded Iraq, and on and on and on. You could go talk about the population reduction due to that. But my point is that it was the 9th month. 9/11. So you have the two towers of the 9 and 11 there is part of the thing. They use the 9/11 or the 911 system of emergency to hammer that in. But also Columbia is the most recent incarnation, at least of the last age, of the female goddess. You could go back and see Hathor and Dionysus and et cetera, and they all have the same symbols. They have a torch, they have a key and a sword, and they put these images back in your face over and over again, reincarnated with a new name. Columbia was just the last of those. So what you got to see was the birth of the New World Order on the 9th month, representing the female's birth cycle on the 11th day. Because the 11, if you looked at any tarot cards, you'll see that the high priestess, which is also this feminine goddess character, has the 2 towers next to her, and she's holding the Torah. So there's a lot of images right there. And then they put up what is essentially Hathor's obelisk. It looks just like it, and they call that the One World Trade Center. Now, back to the AI, you can see that in the not too distant future. I sent you a couple of articles, and these are just, simple robots. And you made the point that, the Boston Dynamics robot is probably old, and so are these little AI robots that they're using to farm and stuff. So we now have tree shaking AI that will go get the fruit. We have weed killing AI. This one right here I'm showing on screen for my viewers is kills 100,000 weeds per hour with electricity and a laser. But they also have planting machines, watering machines, pesticide machines. And if you've watched any of the recent, kind of sci-fi movies, you could take your pick. There's the Logan movie with Wolverine, and in the future, all of the agricultural centers are ran by these giant robots. There's that movie Interstellar where climate change is killing the planet, but the robots are still out there farming the corn. On and on and on. They show a future that doesn't involve the human being, and they already have plans to replace the, I'm going to say, unskilled labor of the third world with robots. And they're only going to keep a small amount of people that are technologically enough savvy to keep their robots and their AI going, because I'm sure that there would be problems. And one of them, obviously, on the forefront of the mind of these elites is a rebellion from their artificial intelligence. And it kind of makes you wonder if the Pentagon is allowing not only their war machine to use AI targeting, but the nuclear arsenal is under the control of an AI. That's public knowledge. Just like the movie War Games, that's a real thing now. And you brought up kind of like Terminator. These people use names of real companies and real things. So the network of AI drones that the Air Force was using was indeed called Skynet, ironically. And there really is a Cyberdyne corporation in Japan that makes robots. So they mix fiction so much with reality that everybody's so confused. But if you start seeing the pattern, you can see that they're ready to replace us, and they have the technology to do it, or at least they think they do. What I don't think that they're accounting for is the evolution of man's mind and the ability for us to adapt. And I think that's their major problem. So they're calling kind of the yes people that will just do whatever people tell them to do and take whatever fad or trend or medication is, popular at the moment. And all of those people are going to be disappearing. As a matter of fact, if you really dig into it, you can see that they're disappearing as we speak. And you were pointing out China's birth policy recently. What's his name? Winnie the Pooh. I always forget how to say his name. Yeah, Xi Jinping has decided that the Chinese people are allowed to have 3 children now. But this is after, like you said, an eternity of nightmarish conditions where families had to pick with their traditions so that their male child would take care of them. And then, poor girls with 10 guys to every female. Women in the U.S. think they had it hard. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, this all is going to a pinnacle, and the way that we've talked about it over the last couple of years, and actually I've been talking about it for 20 years, I'm sure you have too, is the culmination of all of that stuff. People were always, kind of looking at me weird, saying that's never going to happen, that's never going to happen. But I'm sitting here at the point where almost every single thing I warned people about has already happened, and the things that I imagined happening are now happening. So we're at a precipice of human evolution, and the majority of 7.5 billion people are asleep, or they're so intrinsically enslaved in the slave system of the centralized money marketing system, that controls it from the top down, People always think, well, all these corporations do it for money. We're way beyond the idea of money. These corporations have so much money, power, and wealth, and they don't care. And the main people that run everything print the money. So, what do you think about the $1 trillion coin that they're proposing, printing up to save our government? Because that's on its face is the first time I think they've actually shown the public that they just make money out of thin air, and they'll decide the worth and the value of everything.
Well, they're bringing you into the idea of a new monetary system. Like the idea of a $1 trillion coin is so beyond, 99.9999999 all the way to the end of percent of anybody that can imagine that type of wealth in a single value stored package. So they're already showing you that wealth is going to be taking a different form, trillions of dollars in a single coin. That's the programming out there to get you ready for a new monetary system that's going to be based on, they did it with silver. I was surprised they didn't do it with a gold coin. Why'd they do it with a silver coin? Because I think there's some sort of underlying message there that, I was looking at some figures on the paper trades of silver right now, and this is a guy who does a lot of analysis out of Switzerland, and he was saying 880 ounces of silver are traded on paper for every physical ounce of silver. So if you're looking at the conversion in the general, what the Romans did was 12-1, 12 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. So imagine that, 880 multiplied by the differential between that spread in those two minus the paper. That's incredible. It's like $46,000 an ounce, $24,000 an ounce, depending on where you want to move to it. But why did they choose silver to mint that coin with? I mean, it's probably platinum or palladium, but most people that would look at the article would just say, oh, this is a silver coin. New monetary system, silver. They're already giving you glimpses into what's about to happen with revaluing of the currency. It's going to be based on precious metals, at least in some point. Now, is it all? Absolutely not. There's not enough gold, silver, palladium, and platinum across the planet to even facilitate 1/10 or even 1/100th of, the global trade today. Add in a little cryptocurrency, put in a basket of different currencies, special drawing rights, add in the gold and silver, revalue everything. You could bring it back up to something to restart after the
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Be evasive. But that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
And Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, and there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Don't be afraid. Come on in. You might run across some of your old friends. In all your loneliness, I'll try to soothe.
Yeah, no, this is not Keith AZ. No, sir. No, ma'am. This here is the mechanic. I am subbing for Keith AZ tonight. He's got a few things going on over there and wanted somebody to fill in the slot, so I jumped on the mic. What do you expect, huh?